You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the Next Generation episode, Datalore. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Cory Sticha. Hey, Father Cory.
How's it going?
Folks, be sure to get your very own Secrets of Star Trek t-shirt or other merchandise by visiting sqpn.com/merch and be the most fashionable Trekkie that you know. Be sure to check out another show on the Star Quest Network you're sure to enjoy called The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows. You can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/secrets. So, Jimmy, before we start talking about it, can you give us a recap of what happens in Datalore?
Okay. The Enterprise goes to the dead planet where Data was found 26 years ago. There, they find his disassembled twin brother, Lore. Realizing that nothing could possibly go wrong with the idea of reassembling him, they reassemble him. They learn from Lore that the colonists on the planet were killed by a giant space snowflake. Lore quickly fulfills the evil twin TV trope, slips Data a Mickey, and pretends to be Data. He also plans to feed everyone on the ship to the giant space snowflake, but he gives himself away in front of Wesley by using contractions, which Data ridiculously and supposedly doesn't use. Mm-hmm. However, Picard won't listen to his young acting ensign and utters the immortal line, "Shut up, Wesley!" Afterwards, the giant space snowflake shows up and attacks the Enterprise, but Lore, pretending to be Data, gets it to break off its attack. Afterwards, he uses a ruse to go to the cargo bay and lower the shield so that the space snowflake can eat everybody on the ship. Fortunately, Wesley convinces Dr. Crusher to turn Data back on. They confront Lore in the cargo bay, and we get to see androids fighting. Data throws Lore onto a transporter pad, and Wesley beams him into space. Afterwards, the space snowflake decides to just leave. The end.
Yes. Yeah, I had something I want to say about it, but I'll wait till we get to that in the episode. One interesting thing about this episode, it is Gene Roddenberry's...
Oh, wait. There's something interesting about this episode?
Oh, yes. Just a few things.
Yeah.
So this is Gene Roddenberry's final time writing for a Star Trek episode. Now, he stays involved as a producer, but this is the last time he gets a writing credit on the show, and maybe that's why, because there were problems.
Well, he was in control of the show. They didn't kick him off the writing staff.
Oh, yeah.
He had other problems things that he was dealing with. I mean, his health wasn't great, and he was walking around smashed half the time. Right. The people noted that, they didn't think that was Coke in that Coke can he was carrying around and stuff.
Yeah.
There might have been some Coke in there, but it was with other things as well.
Yeah, right. Rum. As we were noting before that he passes away during the season 4 airing of season 4 of TNG. So he dies in a couple of years from this. If you want to see a great documentary, kind of a fun, wild documentary, there's the one that Shatner does of the behind the scenes of TNG that's
Panic
on Netflix.
On the Bridge?
Panic? I think that might be it.
It's either like Panic on the Bridge or Crisis on the Bridge, something like that.
Yeah. There's a good behind the scenes that kind of goes into all the craziness that was going on with the production of TNG, and that would be worthwhile.
One thing I know we see is, as you get into the second, third season, Roddenberry's role is kind of pushed back, and some of the later showrunners kind of start to take more control of it.
And the show gets better.
Yes.
Yeah, and in fact, I was saying before we started recording, I kind of feel like this at about this point, maybe after the next episode, the first season starts to get better. It starts to improve. Like we have famously said that the first season, especially the first half. I think we've all agreed the first season of TNG is a clunker. Yeah. It's the worst of the 7. I don't
know. Season 2 gives it a run for its money. Season 2 has got a lot of lame stuff in it.
Okay.
To my mind, it doesn't really get good until season 4. Season 3 is okay, but seasons 1 and 2 are clunkers.
See, I kind of have felt like the second half of season 1, we start to see improvement. There are some better stories in the rest of season 1. This is the origin of my personal TNG rule, which is if there's a new show you're interested in, give it 6 episodes or a half season before you make a judgment. And that was because if I had just decided on TNG based on the first half of this season, if I didn't get to the second half, I would have given up. Like the first half was pretty bad. So I feel like things get better.
Just remember the second season is when Riker grew the beard. So I mean, that was an improved. It did start improving then,
which led to a TV trope. So the jumping a shark which is based on a Happy Days episode where Fonzie literally ski jumps over a shark. Is when a series has reached a point of irreversible decline. And the reverse of jumping the shark on tvtropes.org or com is growing the beard. So when you grow the beard, when a TV show grows the beard, it's like, okay, it's finally getting better.
Yes. It is universally true. So we've got this Data lore thing, and one of the things that distinguishes Data and lore is the emotions.
By the way, I just want to put it on record. Harlan Ellison was right. Gene Roddenberry can't write worth sour bird poop.
Okay. And this kind of applies to that, because one of the things that Star Trek does a lot is equate emotions with bad. Like Vulcans, being emotional is bad. Being emotionless and logical is good. Data having emotions, if he gets to the emotion ship, he turns bad. See lore. And it's kind of a weird tick that Star Trek has had, especially given Discovery.
I don't know if I don't know if and Discovery actually is a proof of this, but it's not so much emotions are bad, it's the uncontrolled emotions. Right. And that's what you see with lore is he's not controlling his emotions. He's operating more on emotion than he is data.
Okay. Yeah.
This is kind of an outgrowth of the 2 world wars and the Cold War, where you had these, horrible experiences in the 20th century that led people to worry that, okay, we've got this technological power, but we haven't grown enough emotionally to use it responsibly, and it's caused huge problems. Which is the backstory for why Vulcans became emotionally repressed.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that's where I said, like Discovery kind of proves that maxim.
It's true.
Uncontrolled emotions, because Discovery is bad. It's not, it's not evil. It's just bad show.
It's an emotion fest show.
Yes, this is true. Okay, I get that. I agree. So, basically at this point with Data, now that we've had Data for so long, 30 years, but at this point in the storytelling, we only knew that Data was this strange robotic being who had been discovered on an empty planet. We didn't know all the rest of it about Sung and all that the stuff. This is what this story does, is gives us a big chunk of that backstory that we didn't have before. And yet we still have Data as Pinocchio at this point. Data,
after 26 years of being in Starfleet, this is just bad writing. And I've said so all along. If he's been living with humans he progresses more in 7 years than he did in the first 26.
Right. Like the whole I'm trying to learn to sneeze thing, which is like you're just not knowing the common cold, using the conceit that they've figured out all the viruses. By the way, the cold is multiple viruses, not just one. But the common cold, that they've abolished all of those, they've got rid of all of them, that he still doesn't know the history of, like, the common cold is kind of impossible. He's a computer. Download it. Right.
Well, they say he's got not the memories, but the knowledge of these 400 colonists, not to mention he can literally jack into a computer and download what he needs.
Except, well, that's always bugged me is they do it in this episode where he just, instead of downloading information, he reads it really fast off the screen, which is a hugely inefficient way of getting information, but that's, that it's a way of showing the viewer that he's acquiring information at superhuman speeds. But so they end up Picard is taking a detour because they happen to go by this planet on their way to somewhere else, and the planet is a completely barren and dead world because of the crystalline entity, which sucks life out of everything, apparently. And we're found that Data was found laying inactive on a slab out in the open by this other Starfleet crew who didn't spend any time looking around for where the colonists might have been. Like they didn't discover the underground cavern. Geordi does. Does Geordi's visor better than a tricorder? Like
they kind of hinted at that a time or two that it's got better sensors or because the fact that it's feeding into his optical nerve that he can interpret it better or something technobabble thing.
Right. I guess. Okay. So they discovered Dr. Soong's lab, and for somehow no one wondered about the connection between positronic Data and this missing Dr. Soong, who was the father of positronics.
Well, did they ever use the word positronic to describe him before? This?
No, I don't know.
I thought they did. I could be mistaken, but I thought when they introduced Data, they talked about him having a positronic brain, but I could be mistaken.
It's been a long time since I watched that wonderful episode Farpoint, so they introduced him, so I can't remember. But
this is where they figure out Dr. Soong is his creator.
Yep.
And if he looks like Dr. Soong, like Soong based him on his own appearance, no one notices that Data looks exactly like the...
Gee, you've got a robot that looks like a famous roboticist. I wonder if there's a connection.
Exactly.
Simply a coincidence. It was
simply coincidence.
An homage.
That's one of many plot holes in this episode.
Right.
I mean, okay, why would Lore want to kill everyone on the colony? How would it communicate with the crystalline entity? Why does the crystalline entity want to eat everyone? I mean, I can kind of go with those. But then, okay, from what we're given to understand, Lore betrays the colonists to the giant snowflake, and then the giant snowflake eats everybody. But and they apparently, Lore says he told the snowflake where they were hiding, and they were hiding in this underground bunker that's right next to where Data was found. And so, how did the snowflake eat them from within the bunker? Okay, I mean, maybe it could do that, but after Lore betrays them, Lore gets disassembled. Right. And put back in this display case with all of his parts that has been built to display his parts. Right. They're not like in a heap on the floor. Right. So while they're being attacked or just about to be attacked by the giant snowflake, they haven't just turned him off, which they would know how to do because he's got an off switch and Dr. Soong is there and built him. They don't just turn him off. They take him apart and put him in a display case. And they turn off Data and put him on a slab right out front. And it's like, why? Right. What is the logic here, and does this timing remotely work?
The only thing I can think of with the Lore thing is there could have been a gap in time between when he communicated with the crystal from a distance and when they disassembled him. They found out he was bad, disassembled him and put him in the lab, and then sometime later the crystal shows up. Maybe
I know, but that's implausible. I mean, they imply that the bunker is built hastily. I mean, Geordi says it was built hastily. So apparently they knew the attack by the crystal snowflake was imminent, and they slapped this thing together, and that should have been consuming their time, not taking Lore apart and putting him in a display case.
Well, then you have the whole thing because we know eventually that Soong has escaped.
Yeah.
Like, where was he? How does he live? Was he off world? But I think the bigger problem is who laid out Data on the slab and why? Like,
and set him up with the beacon to alert a passing by Starfleet ship.
Right. I mean, I guess it could have been Sung was away and came back, but why would he just take Data with him?
I recently rewatched that episode, and Brothers is the one. So Lore appears in 4 episodes. This one, Datalore. He also appears in Brothers, where we get to see Dr. Sung in the flesh, and in Descent parts 1 and 2. And of those, the best one is Brothers, to my mind. But in Brothers, when Data asks Dr. Sung, how did you survive? He says, I've never been comfortable living somewhere where I didn't have a backup escape plan. And so he implies that he was there and got out at the last minute in a private shuttle or something.
Right.
Yeah. By the way, this was what I was going to mention at the top of the show, is the reason we're kind of doing this out of our established order that we're doing, TNG and the other shows, because Lore apparently is going to show up in the 3rd season of Picard. And so that's why we're talking about Lore in this episode, and next time we'll be talking about Moriarty, the holodeck program, who also apparently has a small part in season 3. So we're just going to look at these 2 episodes, and that's why
I got my way on which Moriarty episode we're going to talk about, the good one, but I didn't get my way on which of the Lore episodes we're going to talk about.
Yep. So
we would have come to this one eventually, anyways. We were pretty.
Yeah.
We were
pretty close. Yeah.
Anyways, so
yeah,
get it out of the way. Get the painting done with.
Yes. Well, because then we'd have to do Angel 1 afterward. Well, so let's just have to do them both, one after the other. So Data, like Odo, is just looking for someone like him in the universe, and so wants to rebuild Lore. And that's another interesting thing that keeps recurring in these Star Trek series is someone who's alone or thinks that they're alone.
Spock, Data, Odo. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of fascinating. And so
Neelix, Saru.
Yep.
Yeah.
Book in Discovery.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll be season 4 of Discovery. Everyone on the crew, for some reason, has trouble talking to Data about Lore. They feel awkward. And Picard kind of mentions, it's because it reminds us that Data's a machine, which, okay, I don't understand. Like, it doesn't make any sense. But okay, it's just weird.
Picard has this, and I remember hating this back in, 1987 when this was first on the air.
Yep.
Yeah.
I remember I was watching it with my wife, and I just hated this scene where you've got Picard and Geordi and Riker and Data in the briefing room, and Picard makes this speech because they're asking awkward questions to Data about Lore, and it's hard to tell because the dialogue is so awkward to begin with.
Yeah.
That these are unusually awkward questions. You have to kind of think about it. Was that more awkward than usual? I guess it's meant to be. But Picard then makes this, okay, let me cut through all this. Let me remind you that, yes, Data is a machine, but we are also just machines, a biochemical kind. And at that point, Riker smiles from ear to ear and thumps the table with his hand in approval. And it's like, oh, man.
It's so awkward.
Well, the scene was also offensive because Picard, they're misgendering and mispronouncing Lore. They keep calling him it.
Yeah. Right. Do you see me as an it as well? Yeah. So, by the way, I just noticed we are recording this, earlier than you're hearing it. But obviously, if we weren't, never mind.
Then it would be live.
Yes, then it would be live. But this is just about the 35th anniversary of this episode. I noticed that when it came out almost exactly 35 years ago.
Wow.
And 35 years later, I still hate it.
So one of the things we get is Data shares a secret with Crusher about his off switch. And he makes a good point. If you had an off switch, would you tell everyone about it? No. And that's one of the things that makes him a machine, by the way, is he has an off switch and we don't necessarily.
Well,
we do. It's just you got to smack some upside the head to do it.
I was like, you kind of, your nose is kind of an off switch. If you hit that hard enough, it will go back into the brain and kill the person.
Too,
But yeah,
well, an off switch does not
permanent
usually.
off switch.
Yeah, it doesn't usually do damage turning it on and off. It's interesting to me that Lore's first words at all are a criticism of Data as being imperfect. That gives us a little foreshadowing. And he immediately starts trying to turn Data against humanity and rejecting humanity.
Yeah. So the first, so we should give closure on that. The first words that Lore has, he's in something like sickbay. They've been having the chief engineer of the week, Lieutenant Commander Argyle, and Dr. Crusher put Lore back together. And they've got him in a bed, and he's under a sheet, and he's not active yet. And they're wondering when he's going to become active. And then someone says, I wonder who was created first, whether it was this android or Data. And Lore opens his eyes and says, he was. But they found him to be imperfect, and so they made me. Mm-hmm. And so already he's one-upping Data. Right. And then within a few scenes, Lore admits to Data that was a lie, and yes, I know you're going to report it to the captain, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, then why did you lie? What was your motive?
Right. He's a jerk, he's unbalanced, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, but if you had the foresight to realize that this lie wasn't going to stick, why did you tell it in the first place?
Right. Well, there's another plot hole among the many, which is, he reveals that the colonists didn't like him, and he gives an excuse for why, but they don't like him, and so Sung has to start from scratch again. So rather than reprogram Lore, he creates a whole nother android. Now, maybe positronic brains, once they're turned on, cannot be reprogrammed or something, that you could come up with.
Yeah, you could corrupt the files by installing a major software patch or something.
Right. So I guess it's not necessarily a hole, but it's sort of questionable.
It's like a DVD-R. Once you burn it, you can't
unburn
it again.
Yeah, right.
You could rip out the brain and put it in a new one, though.
Right. Exactly. You don't have to rebuild from scratch.
And now Lore is an unreliable narrator.
Yes.
So who knows how much of this is true? But the story he eventually, fictionally true, the story he eventually comes up with is they made me, but I was too perfect, and so they petitioned Dr. Sung to make a less human android, namely you. And okay, there's a kind of emotional logic there maybe, but I don't think that it was that the colonists found Lore creepy because he was too human. No. I think the colonists found Lore creepy because he's creepy.
Yeah.
Right.
Constantly. He is just creepy.
He's a jerk.
Well, he's emotionally manipulative and everything else. It's just like
and smug.
Yeah. And smug. Yeah. We talk about again, uncontrolled emotions. Well, he's uncontrolled emotions personified.
Right.
And that's why they didn't like him. That's why they wanted him shut down.
So another one of the flaws of this story is how credulous the crew is. Like everyone except Wesley is
and
completely.
Tasha.
But even then, she doesn't question like Wesley doesn't see through Lore like Wesley does. And that's in fact a very deliberate thing that they do. Is Tasha says, "Are we sure we can trust Data now?" And Picard says, "Yes, we can, of course." And then tells everyone else,
and everyone should recognize that was a completely necessary and legitimate security question.
Right. And then Wesley comes up with a very valid question later on and gets, "Shut up, Wesley!" And he makes. Yeah.
I mean, and he had good reason to. He heard Lore slip when he was impersonating Data.
Yeah.
And use a contraction, which we know Data supposedly doesn't do, except at the very last line of the episode.
Oh, no. Whoa. There's a video.
All the contractions.
And it's not even all. It's just from select episodes. But from this episode alone. Okay, so I've always hated this thing about Data not using contractions. Because, in fact, it would be it's trivially simple to have a computer use contractions. Microsoft Grammar Checker recognizes contractions today.
Yes.
You know, so the idea that the only reason that Data would not use contractions is if he had been programmed not to. Right. Now, I don't mind them having Data speak more formally. Mm-hmm. And so I wouldn't mind at all if the writers had a rule that said, when you're writing dialogue for Data, don't use contractions because he speaks more formally. And it could just be a subliminal thing that the audience would pick up on. It's like, hey, he's talking more formally, but it wouldn't be a rule. Right. That he never uses contractions. It would be a nice writing thing. I would approve of it as a writing thing to say, hey, make this character talk formally, don't use contractions. That would be great. But what's stupid is the idea that that's literally true, that he can't. He even says in the LOL episode, I've never been able to master this. And okay, no, the only reason for that is if you were programmed not to. Right. But when you then point it out to the audience that this is what you're doing and you make it a rule, you're asking for it because your actor will make slips. Yeah, and the director will not catch it. And your writers will make slips. So by making this an explicit rule that you've telegraphed to the audience, you're setting yourself up. It's stupid. Mm-hmm. I mean, the idea of the rule is stupid, and telling the audience about it is stupid. It should just be a background writing thing. Yeah. But in this episode, the episode where they announce the rule and it is crucial to the plot.
Yes.
Brent Spiner uses 4 contractions as Data.
Mm-hmm. Right.
At the beginning, I mean, okay, he actually uses contractions all the way back in episode 1 at Encounter at Farpoint.
Yes.
But in this episode, in 3 scenes, before they announced the rule, he says, actually, I'm quite deficient in some basic human information. He says, I've always thought that it was done hurriedly. I've been most anxious to hear the chief engineer's opinion. Yep. And then after the no contractions rule has been announced and played its vitally important part in the plot of this episode, in the last scene, Picard asks Data how he is, and he says, I'm fine. Come on, guys. Where is your continuity monitor? I mean, your script person the script reader should be catching those. In this episode, at least.
If it were just that last one, I would, because it's accompanied by a twitch, because Lore gave him his twitch.
Yep.
I'm fine, twitch. I would have accepted it maybe as a sort of wink and a nod at is this really Data or is it Lore after all? This sort of thing. I could have accepted it, but you're right. The other ones just blow that out of the water. It just makes, it says, this is careless. We've been very careless. Yeah. And we've talked about it before. This rule is that we've announced is dumb, and especially careless when you've made this the linchpin of this episode. It's the key on which the drama turns is this contraction, no contraction thing.
And this is so much of the Data is still like a 10-year-old child in a android body type mentality, where he's still learning and he still doesn't know simple things. And again, it's not like he doesn't understand, he would understand why someone would sneeze, for example. He would understand. You would think he would have the knowledge, but to be able to replicate the act of a sneeze, okay, that one we can get, but stuff like that.
Just play the sound of a sneeze through your speech synthesizer and pantomime the accompanying action.
Right.
Or you get that silly Brent Spiner doing his choo.
Yeah. So one thing I forgot to bring up before, what was with Riker running the Pythagorean
theorem.
I can say it. Pythagorean theorem at Lore as some kind of test. What was the testing, and why was Lore like, or something like that? I don't really know. I don't know. I didn't get that.
Yeah, so they have Lore in this scene at the operation station in the bridge, which is normally where Data sits. And they're showing him how it works, and they're explaining extremely basic information to him, like the 360 mark 360-degree navigation system they use, so that and they can travel in 3 dimensions and point the ship wherever they want. And Lore starts sucking up to Wesley.
Right.
And buttering him up, and Riker gets suspicious of Lore, and so he says, because Lore, Data is fantastically smart. He has tons of information. So why is Lore an idiot about these things? And Riker decides to, in our day, the 360 Mark 360 navigation system is not something we would be familiar with.
Right.
But anybody should know that. That's like knowing what a telephone number is.
Mm-hmm.
And I see you can punch in these numbers in sequence and it will call the person you want. Really?
Yeah.
Right.
And so Riker gets suspicious that Lore knows more than he's letting on. And he says, and the square of the hypotenuse is equal to? And Lore almost blurts out the square of the other two sides, added together. And then he fakes it. And of course, all that's stupid anyway, with thousands of calculations a second.
Right. He would have been able to figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I guess it's supposed to show that maybe they're not completely clueless, except they are. Everyone but Wesley.
And I wonder too if it was kind of answering the fan answer of, so what is this mark degree thing that you're using for navigation? It's basically the 3-dimensional version of there's a bogey at 5 o'clock, which is a line they use in this episode, by the way. There's a bogey at 5 o'clock, meaning, you look at a clock, 5 o'clock position means it's behind you off to this side, and
right. So,
but in 3 space, it's like, okay, great, 5 o'clock, and which other o'clock at the same time? Is it coming straight down on us, or straight up at us, or is it level with us?
Exactly.
That's why I think this is the only time you hear them use the bogey at 5 o'clock. Instead, there's a bogey at 180 Mark 20 or whatever.
Coming out of the sun.
Yeah.
Which sun?
The one that's closest to us.
Yeah. So, and as part of this, like, Crusher even critiques the fact that they're following Lore's every move. That doesn't seem like the act of a brother. Have you had a brother? I got a brother.
Oh, by the way, you're on board the flagship of the Federation, Starfleet. You might want to make sure that this unknown entity is trustworthy with the secrets that are on it.
A super powerful android.
the super powerful android that, by its own admission, was found insufficient by the colonists, and they didn't want it. They wanted a different one, and then they took it apart.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would monitor this thing too.
Right. So at least they were monitoring, but even like Crusher's, like, that didn't make sense for her to not get that. So Lore replaces Data badly. He doesn't even understand when Picard says, "Make it so." What does that mean? It means make it so.
So, yeah.
Do it.
Like, go do it. Like, what kind of an idiot are you of an android are you? And again, I got to come back to it. Riker and Picard are way out of line toward Wesley, who's the only one showing the right amount of skepticism of Lore, who's pretending to be Data. Like, it just, I get, as you were saying, Father Cory, earlier, Wesley was sort of the brainchild of Gene Roddenberry. It was
he's the author surrogate.
Yes. And so we have to make him the best, which is one of the main fan complaints about Wesley. But gosh, this just highlights how bad that is.
And the only reason why Wesley even questions is he hears Lore mutter about, "Oh, it's so beautiful."
Isn't it?
Right.
Isn't it beautiful? Beautiful, isn't it? Yeah.
Beautiful, isn't it? Yeah. So he hears a contraction and then he thinks it's so beautiful, and it's like, something's not right here.
I wonder why Wesley is waiting so long. I mean, and then to tell Picard, he just used a contraction.
Yep.
I mean, he should have immediately alerted the captain to there's a potential danger here.
Mm-hmm.
And when he finally does, he doesn't out lore. He doesn't say this is lore.
Right.
It's vague, to stretch out the drama, Wesley inexplicably waits longer than he should to say anything, and then he doesn't clearly identify the threat.
Then Lore comes up with the dumbest plan to intimidate the crystalline entity. Let's beam a tree out there and blast it as a warning sign. What? I mean, it is obviously stupid on its face.
By the way, I just also want to mention the crystal entity. I mean, I typically am forgiving of ancient, special effects, because they didn't have what we do now. But I've always thought the crystal entity looked ridiculous. The CGI is just terrible.
Very low polygon count on that.
I was going to say it looked like a mid-90s video game.
Or Tron, really, even like just the flat faces. Crystal.
They had at one point they had done a remastering of TNG. I can't remember if they really upgraded any of the special effects on it though.
Oh, I don't know. Usually, Memory Alpha would talk about it, show the differences, but they didn't have anything here, so I don't know if they've had a remaster to this one. Maybe they just want to forget. Oh, there is a remastered. That's right. There is. They have a remastered.
The entire series
Blu-ray.
Remastered it in 1080p, but I don't know if they did anything. Unlike TOS, where they redid a lot of the special effects, a lot of the outside the ship scenes and stuff like that.
Right.
But I don't think they did any of that with TNG. Remastered it.
Speaking of behind the scenes, apparently the whole idea, they had a different idea for Data and Lore, but Brent Spiner was the one who said we should do an evil twin.
Yeah.
Which I get as the actor, that's fun.
Yeah, and for people who may not be familiar, evil twins were all over television in the 80s and 90s.
Right.
There was evil twin is a TV trope.
Right. I mean, TOS did it with the mirror episode with, the evil twin of...
Even Knight Rider did it. There was an evil twin of both Michael Knight and Kit.
That's right. Oh my gosh. Talk about...
evil twin of the car. And yes, the evil twin of Michael Knight had a goatee.
And, that's right. Wow, that brings it back. So in the end, Lore is down in the cargo bay, and he's going to shut down the shields because Picard apparently didn't realize that in order to intimidate the crystal entity, they'd have to lower the shields to beam the tree into space to blast.
I assume he recognized it but dismissed the risk.
I guess, yeah. Wesley and Crusher show up. Lore threatens Wesley to get Crusher to leave, but I'll turn him into a little burning torch or something really intense. And then and eventually Wesley, after the fight between Data and Lore, beams Lore into space and says he's gone permanently. And he's not.
And he's not. Yeah.
And he's not, because he didn't scatter his atoms in space like he should have done. But no.
Okay, so plot holes at this point in the episode. First, though, another dialogue note. So really horrible stilted dialogue through all of this.
Oh yeah.
But one of the high points of the really stilted, horrible dialogue is when Lore is on his way down to the the storage bay, whatever it is, to beam out the tree. He ambushes Worf in an elevator, and when Worf comes in, he smacks Worf, with his fist and says, "Now show me your warrior fierceness." Oh man!
Oh man! He hits him in the solar plexus. I mean, that looked painful.
And so bad dialogue right there. Then we have Wesley takes Dr. Crusher down to Data's quarters and convinces her to turn on Data, who everyone other than Wesley at this point believes is actually Lore. because Lore said he attacked me and I had to turn him off. And Lore has done whatever surgery on his face with a magic light that takes away his facial tick, and he's given Data the facial tick, so he's done light surgery on him to make his facial muscle twitch, and and it's twitching even though he's unconscious.
Right.
It's like, okay, that's not really how facial ticks work, but
he's off. He's off. I mean, that's
off.
the thing. He's a machine, so it shouldn't be any power.
Right. But but Dr. Crusher is convinced to turn on the machine that everybody, including her, believes was Lore, and just attacked their friend Data, but she turns him on. It's like, okay, that's unsafe. I mean, well, put him in a brig first and turn on the force field until you can assess, who you've got here.
Right.
But she just turns him on. Then Data, oh, by the way, more bad dialogue. Down in the storage room, Lore is talking to the snowflake over the radio, and he keeps referring to it as crystal entity form.
Yeah. Right.
Like, okay. Then we have the confrontation in the cargo bay, and we get to see androids fighting. So great. Wesley beams Lore into space, and we can tell it is Lore because of the uniforms they're wearing. Yeah. Lore is wearing Data's uniform, and Data is wearing this kind of temporary jumper they put Lore in. Yep. But then the snowflake does not attack.
Right.
Okay, you just told the snowflake to suck everyone's life energy as soon as you lowered the shields to beam out the tree. Well, the shields got lowered to beam out Lore. So that's normally how it works. I mean, I guess you could say they beamed him out within the shields.
So he's like bouncing around inside the shields as they fly away.
But if not, those shields went down. Why didn't the snowflake attack?
Right.
And then the snowflake just leaves, and Riker says, "It's gone, sir. Without Lore, it had no way to reach us." And it's like, okay, well, it did if the shields just went down. And even if they didn't, I mean, how smart is this thing? It previously was attacking you through the shields, and it was having success. It was just when Lore talked to it and said, "Hi, I'm Data," and it had told him, "I'm going to identify myself as Data. Please break off your attack and let me do this other thing to make it easier for you."
Right.
Okay, it could have gotten you. So more plot holes.
And maybe they realized, they beamed him out into space. I'm out of here. If they're willing to do that, never mind. I'm not interested. No.
Also, by the way, in this episode, we get to see Lore disassembled, and they also partially open like hatches and Data and stuff. We get to see what their innards are made of, and it is very mechanical.
Yeah.
You've got metal and beeping lights and stuff like that, and it's okay. There is no way Data caught the water virus a few episodes ago. This thing is as vulnerable to respiratory viruses as your car stereo is.
Yeah, right.
This is not a synthezoid that is close to being a human and could literally catch a biological virus. Right. That is not happening. So that also was illusion shattering. But they then say earlier in the episode that, well, why weren't Data and Lore killed by the crystal snowflake? And they say, well, Lore was disassembled at the time, and Data wasn't alive yet. He wasn't turned on yet. And I go, no,
they're just machines.
They're just machines. The crystal snowflake didn't suck their life energy because they don't have any.
Yeah.
Right.
They've got battery power.
Because it wasn't sucking up battery power because the lights turned on in the underground facility, that sort of stuff. Yeah. When Wesley and Bev go into Data's quarters there, Wesley looks at Data on the floor, who it looks like Lore. "Mom, it's Data. He's been hurt." why does he say it as if, oh, I recognize it's Data and not Lore? Like, it's not like twins who have slight differences. They are the exact same thing. Like, it didn't make any sense for him to be able to say it's Data as opposed to, Mom, I'm really telling you, I think this really is Data, or something along those lines. And then
the line is there. It's a clunky Gene Roddenberry line to hammer the audience over the head with the fact this is Data. This is not Lore.
Yeah.
Even
It's
though
Data,
he's dressed
Mom.
like Lore.
Yeah. I heard you know how to turn them on. And Beth says, this is very serious. So just tell me to shut up, Wesley, and I will. You're being very unfair, Wes. Click, turn them on. Like, that didn't make any logical sense. Like,
the only good line in this is when Lore calls Wesley troublesome little man-child.
Yes.
That was good. I like that one though.
The good part is when they insult Wesley throughout. That's what makes this episode good.
It certainly generated a lot of memes. I mean, shut up, Wesley alone is
yeah.
And that got Will Wheaton.
Yeah,
understandably, he got very annoyed by it eventually because every time he posts something on Twitter, that was the immediate response.
Well, in fact, there was a circumstance where he said, the next person who tells me, shut up, Wesley, on Twitter, I'm going to block. And then Patrick Stewart tweets, shut up, Wes.
I missed that one.
It was fantastic.
That's good. Also, Will Wheaton kind of has his revenge because he accumulated so many followers on Twitter that at least, I don't know if this is still the case, but for a time, the Twitterati measured their follower count in Wheatons.
Yes.
Which is like 500,000 people.
Right. So, what was the one other thing? The best thing about this episode is that, I think, from my point of view, is we get Lore, which eventually becomes an interesting counterpoint to Data. This, the evil twin thing, but it's almost in a way, if we want to make a Doctor Who analogy, the master to Data's doctor. And he provides this interesting tension because he's Data's quote unquote brother, but yet he's an enemy as well. And I'm curious how Picard is going to deal with this and how they're going to bring in, now that Data is gone, bring in Lore as an antagonist. I'm kind of fascinated by this, what they're going to try to do with him there. But I think with all the problems of this episode, I'm glad that we had Lore because we got some pretty interesting stories out of it afterward, from my point of view. Father Cory? Right.
No, one thing I'm thinking of is I'm kind of surprised Brent Spiner wanted to go back and play the Lore character at all. That was part of the reason why they killed Data, is he didn't want to play Data and have to explain why Data is older now.
Right.
Now they're going to do that with Lore anyways.
Well, he wanted a paycheck because he kept showing up in Picard as different characters in the Sung line of things.
Yeah, all the Sungs look the same. So I mean, you can just keep playing them at different ages. But
that's some strong DNA.
Yeah, I think the Data can't grow old thing is ridiculous anyway. They showed in All Good Things in the series finale that he had he had white hair, some white hair in that. So Data I think Data is programmed to grow older.
Or at least can modify his appearance because he's a machine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right. So, okay. Any other final thoughts, Jimmy?
Nah, I just am not wild about Lore. I mean, he's reasonable in Brothers as a character. He's good in that. But other than that, I'm not a fan of Lore. I don't like the Descent episodes. And I'm not wild about having him in the Star Trek universe. So I could have done without the whole Lore thing.
Okay. And Father Cory, you didn't have anything else, right? Okay,
else.
good. Nope. All right, so let's take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Matthew B., David L., Dan S., Robert P., and Dione R. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And we'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edited this episode. So that's it from us. We'd love to hear what you think of this episode, Datalore. Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, or our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send an email to trek@sqpn.com, or visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/Discord. And you can now watch The Secrets of Star Trek in full video on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the TNG episode Ship in a Bottle. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing The Secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thank you. Live long and prosper. And now show me your warrior fierceness.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Trek and StarQuest. And remember, shut up, Wesley.